Today we're going to be looking at measurements. This shape might look fairly familiar. We've already done one drawing of it. Today we're going to draw it again, but we're going to take it to another step. We're going to get dimensions for these cubes. So the first thing that we're going to do is let's talk about what we're looking at and what our cube is going to be. This shape is what we're going to be putting our measurements on the paper for. And we're going to make an assumption here, and we're going to assume that each of these little bitty cubes is 3/4 of an inch squared. That means each and every side is 3/4 of an inch. Alright, so that would make this 3/4 of an inch. If we add another one, that'd be 3/4 here, and then 1.5 this way, 1.5 tall. If we added one more cube, we'd be looking at something that was 3/4 of an inch wide and 2 1/4 of an inch tall. All right. One way to look at it would be this right here. We'll use a little isographic chart to show our height of each one. So this one would be 3/4. This one would be 1 1/2 tall, and this one would be 2 1/4 tall. All right. So that's something we want to be thinking about the entire time we're drawing this. But first off, we need to have something to put dimensions on. So we're going to take this drawing right here, or this sheet, and we're going to draw our orthographic of this shape. We won't need our isographic for this shape today because we don't put dimensions on an isographic. So let's look at this. We're going to use this as our front. This will be our top. And this will be our right side. Alright, so we're going to place it here. First thing we're going to do is we're going to start with our front view. Alright, we're going to knock this out a little bit quicker because all of us should be experienced at drawing an orthographic at this point. So I'm going to start on this corner, work my way up, over, and around, and get my shape drawn fairly quickly. I highly recommend that everybody draw along because you will need someplace to put your dimensions. Please don't use a pen. I'm using a pen so you can see what is happening a little bit more clearly. Anytime you're drawing on this type of drawing, it's highly recommended to use a pencil because later on you're going to have to go back and fix a mistake or clean something up, and can't do that with a pen. And whiteout does not work well on graph paper. Now you can see I'm using a few tricks that some of you may have picked up while drawing your other drawings, making sure that I use continuous lines because I can know how certain lines will continue forward. It helps us knock something out a little bit quicker. So we're looking at this. This is a front view. Everything looks good. Let's go to our top view. I always like to continue a line on if I can. It makes life easier. It makes the drawing look more crisp and clear as well. You'll also note that I'm always using a ruler. A lot of people try to get away without using a ruler, and what they end up doing is making a mess. It doesn't look good, it doesn't work well, and your drawing just will never ever represent what you're trying to draw correctly. You'll be looking at squiggly lines and things like that. It'll be hard to tell what matches what. So it's always just best to use a ruler. Alright, you can see I've knocked out my top drawing now. Go back and check it. Looks good. Got a little spot here to clean up, kind of get that nice. There we go. Looks nice. Everything's acceptable, and it matches what it's supposed to. Lastly, we're going to go over to this side and do our right side. So I always take my shape and I put it back in the bottom left corner, and I always put it on the front view before I move it to show the view that I'm looking at. So I'm going to look at the right side. That's this side. Put it over there. Keep it where I can kind of see it, and knock that out too. Another thing that you can note is that I'm equidistant from each side. I've came in 3 by 3 on each side. That is super critical when we're doing dimensions because these drawings have to line up. They have to be on the same plane. Each edge has to match other corresponding edges of the drawings. If they don't, your dimensions won't work out right, they won't look correct, and you'll have a huge problem with getting anything to line up correctly. Alright, so knocked out this side as well. There we go. Now, we've got our orthographic drawings. All of us should know how to do this. Now, I'm going to switch from my pen to a pencil now. Alright, because we're going to need guidelines. Now, a lot of students have a really bad habit of drawing these very, very thick lines for their guidelines. When you do that, you can't tell which line is your drawings line and which line is from something else. So, one thing that we're going to do is we're going to look at a drawing that I've prepared ahead of time and see if we can kind of see how a line should look. Alright, you can see I have another drawing sitting here, and now this one, a little bit more complex. It's actually this shape right here. If we look at it, let's see if we can get our front view. That would be our front view. You can see it's much more complex. There's going to be another video for this one if you haven't already done it. But now let's look at our dimension lines. So we've got dimension lines and guidelines. First thing we want to do is guidelines. So you'll note that this is all in pencil. I'm taking my straight edge, I'm keeping it nice and even, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a light line. It's not much, you can barely see it, but you can see that this is much darker than this line. Okay? And for this particular drawing, there will be a lot of guidelines. You can guideline from almost any portion of the drawing. You're trying to connect portions of the front, right, and top view so that it's something that you can see. So this is a few examples of some guidelines that you can see. Now, this is nowhere near all the guidelines for this particular drawing, but you can see there's definitely a difference in the thickness of the line, how dark it is, and these lines could not be confused as part of the drawing. Alright, so that's a very big key. If anything, I'd say this line right here might be even a little too dark. I might have to come back in and give it a little bit of an erase so that it's something a little bit lighter. That is very important. But let's go back to our drawing for today. We're going to add some guidelines. Now you want a guideline anywhere where the drawing has a change, anywhere where there's something that bumps out, and you want it to connect to the opposite portion of the drawing. So if you have the front, the right, and the top, you're going to want to make sure that it's something that would correspond to both sides. So like the bottom of this shape, if we look at this here, this plane, and if I flip it to the right side, and this plane, they're the same plane, they're the same portion of the drawing. So they're connected, and we would want a guideline in between them. Alright, guidelines are very important for whenever we get to our dimensions. Alright, so I'm going to put one there. I'm going to place one here, and place one here. Now you gotta remember, this is so when you're looking at a drawing, you can really tell what planes are connected, what sides are the same, and where there are major changes in the drawing. It really connects your three separate pictures and makes them one picture. It makes them one drawing. Alright, so you can see I've got some here. The guidelines are crossing, and everything looks really good. So now what we're going to do is we're going to start working our way around the drawing, and your goal is to represent each and every portion of the drawing, each and every dimension as best as possible. Now, we know that this height here, from here to here, is the same here and here, as well as from here to here, which is this spot right here. So I only need one dimension on this side, and it'll tell me the dimension over here. And that's the real key whenever you're looking at these drawings, is to do as few dimension lines as possible while still giving all of the information. The other thing that you can remember is that dimensions are additive. So if I have two dimensions, I can add them together. If that will tell me what the dimension of another spot is, I don't need one to cover the whole distance. So let's start right here. I always like to put my dimensions on my front picture first. It just helps me think. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cover from here to here. Now we know from our little guide that that's going to be 3/4 of an inch. So I'm going to make a darker line, but it's not going to touch my drawing. There is some space. You see that little bit of white space right there between. You never want your dimension lines to touch your drawing. You just want them to be close to it. Okay, that's the first one. Now, me personally, I always like to keep my dimension lines together, and you can see here and here I've got this line. I want to cover all of my height. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here, I'm going to connect from here and go all the way till I'm equal with this portion right here. That way I can have nice straight dimension lines that all work together fairly well, and we'll see a little bit more of that in just a second. So let's start with this one. I need to leave myself some space. So what I recommend doing is, first thing you do is write in your height and then draw your lines that I'll show you in just a second. So I'm going to come over here, I'm going to write 3/4. It's always fractional whenever you're doing inches, if it's a theoretical inch. Now when we get to calipers, that'll be a little bit different. Okay, so that's 3/4 of an inch. And then from here to here, we know that that's 2 blocks, so it's going to be 1 1/2 inch. So I'm going to come in here, I'm going to find the middle, which is right there. I'm going to write 1 1/2. Now, the reason I've done this is so I can take my ruler and make this look nice. Alright, so I'm going to come from here, I'm going to draw a line to here. I don't want to get inside my numbers. I'm going to draw a line from here to here, still not touching my numbers, and from here to here. Okay, we're almost done with our first set of lines. Now we're going to add small arrows pointing to each dimension line and here. So what we've seen is this is 3/4 of an inch, this is 1 1/2 inch. That also means that over here, this is 3/4 of an inch from here to here, and this is 1 1/2 inch. Okay, that's easy enough. Let's look at this top portion of the drawing. Now this drawing is pretty nice. It's pretty easy shape, and we're not going to have a lot of dimension lines because a lot of it's going to be understood over on the other side. So we're going to go from here to here, and then from here to here. So we're going to draw our edges of our dimension lines. Here to here, here to here. Try to keep them uniform. It is very, very difficult to keep them perfectly uniform, but you want to do as best you can. Now, I usually like to try to avoid something like this. See this? It doesn't look great, it doesn't help our drawing any. So let's change this up. Let's erase that out. We're not going to put one there. I don't like to cross my dimension lines when I can help it. And I have an opportunity up here to not have to cross all the way over. So we're going to erase this one as well. Because sometimes whenever you're looking at something, you'll find a mistake that you'll make or something small that can be changed, and that's why we use a pencil. Alright, so let's go over here. Let's add this dimension line to the top instead of down to here. So we're going to add a line here, a line there. See, note it's still not touching the drawing. There's definitely space there. And a line from here down. I want to make sure they're nice and even. Always keep your lines as even as possible. And we know that each of these blocks is going to be 3/4 of an inch. So 3/4, 3/4. There I go from here to here, here, here to here. And then we'll draw our arrows. Now, we're getting closer to being done. Alright, so let's look at what we do know. We know this height from here to here and from here to here. And now that covers all of these sides. Okay, so we've got all that. Now, let's look at this. We're looking at the top. I've got from here to here, that works out. I got from here to here, also works out. But I don't know this height from here to here. Okay? Now, this is going to be a spot where I'm going to have to cross a dimension line. There's really no way around it. I can't represent the height this way very well. So I definitely want to cover this distance right here. Okay? So let's look at this. We have to cover this side. We don't know this dimension. Nowhere in here is this covered. Okay? Because we definitely know the height of all sides, thankfully, for this shape. But we do not know this side. This is the last remaining side that we do not know the information for. And we really can't represent it over here correctly. It would be problematic. So we're going to go over up here, and this time we are going to cross our dimension line, even though it's not preferable. Sometimes it has to be done. The main goal is to try to convey your information in as clear and concise of a way as possible. One method we could do is represent this distance over here, but that's not super concise, it's not super clear. And if you were looking at the drawings, you'd have to do some mental geometry to try to get that to work out, and that's not what we're looking for. So from here to here is 3/4 of an inch. From here to here is 3/4 of an inch. Okay? I'm going to draw a line from here to here, here to here, and from here to here, and do our little arrows. Okay? Now notice how my arrows are not huge, they're not big, and I'm taking my time. I'm not really like just throwing an arrow on it. Okay? Now, let's look at where we don't need dimensions. We're going to double check. We got our height, everything's good. I know that if I take 1 1/2 inch and 3/4 of an inch and I add them together, it's going to be 2 1/4 inches. So I don't need to do the whole distance because I'm doing this part and this part. Same thing with here. 3/4 of an inch plus 3/4 of an inch is going to be 1 1/2. Same thing on this side. You also note that I didn't even have to put any dimensions over on this side. Now once I finished with this, the very last thing that I would do with my drawing is throw on my isographic. Try to get it in there as nice and neat as possible. Tape it in or glue it in, and that is one complete drawing. You'll notice that I didn't write front, right, or top over here. The other thing I would want to do is I'd probably want to put a title, my name, the date. I'd want to fill in all of my information that is pertinent to me, so I know it's from me. But you can see there's some of the tricks that you've used to keep track of your drawings so far. You might want to have to drop to the wayside. I'm definitely not going to color in my sides because that would make it very unprofessional. But this right here, with this drawing, somebody should be able to take a bunch of cubes and build an exact replica of what I have just with these 4 sets of drawings. The isographic, the right, the front, and the top, combined together with the dimensions and my dimension lines should be able to inform me of how to correctly build my shape, which is what the end goal of any drawing is.